When I say survival game, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Maybe a zombie shooter, a battle royale? If that's what you think, you especially should stay tuned. Because while I love a good battle royale or zombie shooter, it's not exactly what I would call a survival game. For me, survival games have always been more about person versus nature, solitude in the wilds, scraping a living off the land while either planning your escape, just trying to survive, or possibly even trying to build yourself a life. I've been a huge fan of wilderness survival ever since I was young. As best I can remember, I think it all started when I watched the movie Castaway. Tom Hanks gets stuck on an island, he's forced to change and adapt in order to survive, and eventually he has to try and escape. I don't know what, but something about that just really captivated me as a child. However, the bigger influence on me was definitely Survivor Man. No, I'm not talking about that Bear Grylls dude who drinks his own pee and then goes and eats steak and sleeps in a bed in a hotel. I'm talking about the real Survivor Man, Les Stroud. Les would get dropped off in the middle of nowhere with nothing but his camera equipment, maybe a tool or two, and a couple everyday supplies, and he would survive for a week, sometimes 2 weeks. He would often give himself challenges, like working with only one arm as if he had been in an accident, often putting himself in real danger to teach people how to survive these kinds of circumstances. This man is one of my heroes, hands down. Not to mention he can play a pretty mean harmonica. To qualify for this list, games needed to meet most, if not all, of the following criteria. Players need to manage multiple status bars, such as hunger, thirst, stamina, etc. Players need to forage or harvest for tools, weapons, shelter, etc. And ideally, the primary mechanic for the game will be wilderness survival or situational survival of some kind. So today, we're going to go over some of my choices for the best survival games on the market, and we'll give a couple quick nods to the games that brought the genre this far. Please keep in mind that this is just my personal rankings on a game's survival aspects and atmosphere. It's not necessarily a ranking on the game's overall quality. If you'd like to contest me on any of these games, please feel free to leave a comment down below and drop a like while you're at it. After a grisly plane crash where neither you or your son are wearing a seatbelt and yet somehow you're both miraculously unharmed, a strange, mysterious figure comes and takes your son. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, survive the cannibal attacks, rescue your son, and escape the forest. The forest has all the right makings of a great survival game. There's a huge island to explore, there's lots of hidden secrets, there's hunger, thirst, stamina, and exhaustion meters that you need to manage, and there's a ton of crafting and building options. The only reason it's so low on the list is because it's a survival horror game, and it leans heavily on that horror aspect of things. There is a co-op mode that makes it a little bit less terrifying.
Oh my god, DJ!
But not much.
Jesus Christ.
What the fuck?
Erries made that so much worse with the yell.
The Forest is a really polished survival game, and I can highly recommend it if you can handle the horror aspect of the game. And truthfully, if it wasn't a horror game, it would have made it much higher on my list. If you haven't played Oregon Trail, then it's very likely you've at least heard of it. In fact, this is probably the first survival game to ever be released. While it was originally developed in 1971 as an educational video game, it's had a lot of remakes and remasters over the years that have really revitalized it. As the leader of a small group, you have to make your way across the country with nothing but your wits and your luck. Along the way, you have to gather food, medicine, other various supplies to help your journey. You'll have to be careful along the way because every decision could result in an injury, or illness, or possibly even the death of a companion. Breath Edge is a really unique adaptation of the classic survival genre. After some mysterious circumstances cause your spaceship to crash, you'll be forced to create tools, machinery, weapons, and even food to make your way across the debris field. With limited resources and range and an even more limiting oxygen supply, the player seems encouraged to take chances and risks that they might not exactly be comfortable with. Now there's a lot of polish and detail to this game, and if you'll forgive the pun, it is really breathtaking. But the game does take a goofier approach than any of the other games on this list. There's some very comical narration as you progress or discover things of interest, and overall Breath's Edge shows a lot of promise, although at times it can be a little bit too goofy to take seriously. And regrettably it's still in early access, so I couldn't really justify putting it any higher. Raft is a relatively new title, but it shows a lot of potential. You find yourself floating on a raft in the middle of the ocean, and you have to gather supplies and resources in order to build upgrades and expansions. You have an adorable pet shark that follows you around, and he loves to play, although he can get a little aggressive sometimes. There's a large amount of crafting and building available in the game, and the developers release regular updates. The story available so far is really interesting, and it actually feels like you're kind of embarking on an adventure. The game also does a really good job of making you feel like you're working to stay alive. Overall, it's a really fun title, and it gives the player a lot of creative freedom. While normally I would consider this game to be more of a city builder or a strategy, I feel like the mechanics and the atmosphere of this game are just as compelling as any other survival game. You really have to balance keeping your people fed and warm while also expanding your city and exploring the surrounding area for more resources and people. Morale also plays a really big part in the game. Story progression, random events, and policy upgrades will all have both negative and positive effects on your city's morale. You'll also be forced to make a lot of difficult decisions that will affect the way your city grows and expands over time. As the temperatures keep dropping, will you be inefficient but benevolent, or effective but cruel? The game offers several different scenarios and difficulty levels to play through, and I'd also recommend a lot of the DLCs because they are really great expansions on the game.
War. War never changes.
Except in New Vegas because they added a hardcore mode. Now, Fallout New Vegas at its core is an action RPG, but it snuck onto the list because of how well they did their hardcore mechanics. On top of having to keep yourself fed, hydrated, and well rested, you have to avoid radiation, your carrying capacity is decreased, there's no miracle cures for broken bones or serious injuries. It's a wild ride to say the least. There's certainly some crafting mechanics as well. You can build weapons, medicines, and various other objects to help you along your way. I didn't find myself using these too often because you tend to find all that you need while exploring the world. Overall, this game's survival mechanics are just great. I love them. However, again, since it's not really a survival game at its core, I couldn't really justify putting it any higher on the list. Stranded Deep is the closest game on this list to being a true homage to Castaway. This is another early access title, but it has enormous potential. Unlike The Forest, this game makes nature itself the enemy. You have to build yourself a shelter, find safe food and water, and try and avoid heat stroke. Exploring nearby islands can provide extra resources, but they could also introduce new threats. The crafting and building options are quite impressive, and needless to say, it's a beautiful game as well. The user interface can be a little bit trickier to get a handle on, but once you've got the hang of it, it's actually a pretty fun game. Time for the heavy hitters now, everybody. Top 3. Also time for all the hate comments.
Attention. Hull failure imminent. All personnel abandon ship.
Yes, Subnautica is only number 3. I'm sorry. I truly love this game, I really do. However, I just happen to like the survival aspects of 2 other games a little bit more. Fight me in the comments. Bring it. I'm not scared. This game is absolutely phenomenal. Visually, it's one of the most breathtaking games on the list by far. The music and ambient sounds are wonderful, and they really drive home this sense of being lost on a strange planet. With a massive map to explore, multiple unique biomes, and a healthy mix of both the most beautiful creatures and the most terrifying creatures I've ever seen in a video game, this game is an absolute blast from start to finish. There's an impressive amount of crafting options, plenty of building options, there's a few vehicles you can get to, and not being early access means the game is actually finished and you can play through the story mode. And before any of you ask, I did not include Subnautica Below Zero because it's not finished. It's more or less the same as Subnautica. I don't know, it's fine. There's another one that they're working on right now, it's called Sub-Zero. Still early access, but there you go. Now, Green Hell is one of the most difficult and realistic survival games that I have ever played in my life. It is by far the least forgiving game on this list, even on the easiest setting. I have died every single time I've played this game, and I love it. Trapped deep in the Amazon jungle, you'll have to survive everything from snakes and giant critters to infections and malnutrition. You may even encounter some hostile natives. You will encounter some hostile natives. And from all the research that I've done on survival in the rainforest, this seems very realistic. You can't let your guard down or deal with your problems later, because this game is a constant struggle for survival. Even when you think you've got the hang of it, you can die from the simplest of mistakes. If you want a difficult but really realistic survival experience, I can definitely recommend Green Hell, as long as you're not afraid of a bit of a learning curve. Honorable mentions. Minecraft. I think the only reason Minecraft didn't make the list was because I didn't feel like its survival aspects were pronounced enough. Still obviously a phenomenal game, best-selling game ever, just not enough of a survival game to make the list. Don't Starve. Don't Starve is a very well-rated game, and I highly recommend you check it out. It just wasn't for me personally. I didn't really get the satisfaction out of it that I was hoping. But again, very highly rated, so if you're looking for a survival game, you might want to check it out. Conan Exiles. Conan is a fantastic game. It definitely could have been on the list if there was more space. Very highly rated game. It is a 18 plus mature game, so if you're under the age of 18, I cannot recommend it to you. But a fantastic game, loved it. Great to play with friends. Grounded. Grounded is a very new game that's just released. It's still in early access. Regrettably, I haven't had a lot of chance to play it yet. From what I have played, it seemed really interesting, but I just couldn't get enough of a feel for it to put it on the list yet. The Long Dark has been my go-to survival game ever since its original early access release in 2017. Anytime I need to scratch that survival itch, The Long Dark is where I go. There are very few games that give me that realistic feeling of struggling to survive my environment, but The Long Dark definitely delivers a high-quality survival experience, with dangerous wildlife and even more dangerous weather. Admittedly, the development process for this game has been a little bit slow, however so far this game has been well worth the wait. There are 3 out of the 5 story chapters available so far, and there's plenty of fun to be had with both the regular challenges and the seasonal challenges. Not to mention the fully customizable survival mode. I love the game's stylized look, and the user interface is really clean and easy to understand. There's a large world to explore, lots of crafting, and a lot of secrets to discover. Even though there aren't many options for building shelters yet, I kind of like it. It adds a bit of difficulty to the game that I really enjoy, because when you venture out, you better be prepared to hunker down wherever you can, or to try and push through to the next shelter. On top of hunger, hydration, and exhaustion, you desperately need to keep yourself warm because the weather is unforgiving. The game has certainly progressed to the point where I can highly recommend it to anyone looking for a realistic survival experience. Although I may have a bit of a bias seeing as the company who makes the game is Canadian and the game takes place in northern Canada as well. But truthfully, this game actually really does hit all the right buttons for me. It's difficult but not completely unforgiving. It provides an intense and yet somehow still oddly relaxing survival experience. It may not seem like the most exciting game on the list, but in my opinion, it provides the most well-rounded survival experience. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Please, if you have any disagreements, or if you like my list or don't like my list, whatever, leave it down in the comments. I'd love to discuss it with you. If you'd like to see my review on Red Dead Redemption and Rockstar's business practices, feel free to click right here. If you'd like some wholesome time with Erries, feel free to click over here. Anyways guys, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, night, weekend, whatever it happens to be for you, and I will catch you next time. Peace.